Greetings and welcome to the Connecticut Freedom Trail's Conversations at Noon. I'm Greatheart Griot Andre Kitt, filling in for Outreach Director Tammy Denise, but just for today, where we will be following the footsteps of a prince, descendants of Prince Abdulrahman Ibrahima ibn Sori. But first, the Connecticut Freedom Trail was established in law in August of 1995 by the Connecticut General Assembly to tell the stories of the African American community and their contributions in shaping the state of Connecticut. Just 1 year later, in September of 1996, the trail opened in 60 towns with 30 sites, with the initial goal to have sites in all 169 municipalities, recognizing these Black narratives. Now, before we begin, let's take care of a little housekeeping. Take the survey and let us know how we're doing. Let us know what kinds of information you'd like to hear. Also, please feel free to ask us any questions from whichever social media platform on which you are watching. We'll do our best to respond to them all. Now, for our special guest today. We have some of those very descendants. We have Her Royal Highness Sheika Karen Chatman. She's from the official Royal House of Sori. And Dr. Artemus Gaye, also a descendant from the Royal House of Sori. And join us also today is a member of my church, Center Church in downtown Hartford, Connecticut, Reverend Dr. Eric Hearst, who is Justice and Faith Formation Minister and Director. Panelists and friends, welcome. Well, let's go ahead and get started with ladies first. How about that?
Good morning. How are you?
Her Royal Highness, welcome. Good to see you again.
You as well. So thank you so much for having us, and also to the state of Connecticut, and also for the Freedom Trail, and of course at noon. It's a pleasure to be here. I don't want to spend a lot of time, but I would like to let the audience know how we got here. I am the great-great-great-granddaughter, fifth generation of Prince Abdulrahman Ibrahima ibn Sori, who was enslaved in Natchez, Mississippi from 1788 to 1829 in my small town of Natchez, Mississippi, by a gentleman named Thomas Foster. Prince Sori, who a lot of people also call him Prince Ibrahima, because back then, to speak, I think, a second language, since Abdulrahman is a Arabic name, I think it was hard for some of the slaves to enunciate, so it became Prince Sori. Um, Prince Sori was from he was originally born in Timbuktu, but his father, who was king at the time, had also taken over an area of Futajalan called Timbo, and he joined his father there when he was very young in his early 20s. He was educated in Timbuktu at the university there, where he spoke 5 languages. He also was fluent in various tribal languages, as well in mathematics, algebra, and history, world history, and geography. So when he went to be with his father to run the kingdom there, he was in charge of a massive army there at a very young age. However, he was captured by an opposing team of of other enemies. There was a war, a tribal war. They took him and sold him to the slave ship, where he was taken to the Dominican first, then to New Orleans, and was sold in Natchez, Mississippi, on the slave block, or the auction block, as they call it, and was purchased by a gentleman named Thomas Foster. When he found out, when Thomas Foster, he kept telling Thomas Foster he was a prince from a royal family and that his father would pay a big sum to have him freed. The slave owner felt that he was more valuable to him and would not release him. Going forward, there was a gentleman by the name of Dr. Cox who eventually saw him in the market and recognized him from his native land of Timbo, and did many things to try to get him released. But again, the slave owner did not want to release him. However, as fate has it, Thomas Gallaudet, which we will probably hear more from Center Church on this, was a member at Center Church there in Connecticut, and went forward with a movement to free Prince Sori once there was a letter written to the Moroccan Sultan to free him, and a visit to the White House for John Quincy Adams. So I came into play because my grandmother told me at a very early age of who her great grandfather was, well, actually it was her grandfather, and told me about Prince Sori's story. And she always told me no matter how bad it was, because I came from a slave town, which was quite oppressed, and I came up during the civil rights movement. My grandmother always told me to have that presence and that power, and that I was a princess. And the reason I'm referred to as Sheika, a princess, because Sheika is the Arabic name for princess. And I wanted to honor my great grandfather and my great great grandfather by carrying on the lineage of using the Arabic name for which we have, input from. So it has been a journey. Dr. Artemus Gaye, who you will hear from later, is from Liberia, where once my grandfather did get freed, he settled with his wife in Monrovia, Liberia. Unfortunately, he passed away 4 months after being freed in Liberia. So there's so much to unpack, but I wanted to give the audience a little bit of that history and let them know that most of the descendants from the official Royal House of Sori are located in Natchez, Mississippi. If we consider Natchez as the root, because that's where all 9 of Prince Sori's children resided in. And after his death, they remained there, and some of them went into Louisiana, into St. Mary's and East Baton Rouge Parish. So we were able to use that oral history along with researching the Mississippi archives, slave owner records, and the National Archives to reach out and find out who we are, since there was no DNA to compare during that time. So we have been fortunate enough. We're one of the few families in the United States that can trace our, not only where we're from in Africa, but to the very village. So I want to thank the audience again for sharing their time with us here today. Back to you, Andre.
Thank you, Sheika Karen. Thanks for giving us some perspective and overview about the story. You mentioned Center Church in there, about how Center Church played a part in welcoming your ancestor, Abdulrahman. And I wanted to pull in Reverend Dr. Eric Hearst, because he had a portion to, he's from Center Church and fellow congregant of mine. So Eric, tell us more about that whole time period and the perspective in which you saw.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me on the program. Greetings to the members of the House of Sori who are also with us this afternoon. Center Church, the First Church of Christ in Hartford, is the oldest church in Hartford, Connecticut. It is the church in which Hartford and the Colony of Connecticut officially began in 1636, even though it was founded in 1632 in Massachusetts, and then with a migration or emigration southward, the people who came with Reverend Thomas Hooker established this colony and this church. In the 19th century, around the time of Abdulrahman's visit, there was, we would say, a phenomenon within the theological world of how to address the issue of slavery and the subjugation of people of African descent. There were major debates in churches, in seminaries, etc. And in 1816, beginning in Princeton, New Jersey, a Presbyterian minister named Robert Finley proposed what would become known as the American Colonization Society, which actually took root later that year, formed in Washington, D.C. And the ACS, which is a very complicated, complex, nuanced organization with a complicated history, the ACS was concerned with working for the gradual abolition of slavery and the removal or the expatriation of free persons of color back to Africa, with the thought being, for a variety of reasons, that free people of color and the white population could not live peaceably together in the United States. That is documented for anybody who wants to know where that came from. That is documented. You will find that in print, in articles from the day, and in research on the ACS. Connecticut, as a state at that time, was very supportive of the idea of colonization. And in Hartford, Connecticut, its greatest champion was the Reverend Thomas Hopkins Gallaudet, who is a co-founder of the American School for the Deaf and one of the co-creators with Lauren Clare of American Sign Language. He was a life member of Center Church and ordained minister in the Congregationalist tradition. And he got wind of what was happening with Abdulrahman after he was freed by executive order by President John Quincy Adams. That's the gentleman on the screen above Gallaudet. Gallaudet's at the bottom. He got wind of Abdulrahman's situation, which was he was freed. He secured his wife's freedom, but they wanted their 9 children and grandchildren to all go with them to Liberia. He was freed on the condition that he leave the United States and not enjoy freedom stateside. That is documented in the movie about his life, in the books about his life, and the source documents from the time. So as they were trying to find a way to raise funds to purchase their entire brood, for lack of a better word, they were having difficulty. They went on a national tour sponsored by the ACS, and Thomas Hopkins Gallaudet invited them to Connecticut, where he arranged several meetings for them. The first, we found out last May, when the delegation visited, there was a reception at the American School for the Deaf on October 1st. And then on October 2nd, there was the statewide meeting of the Connecticut Colonization Society, where Abdulrahman was the featured speaker along with Thomas Gallaudet. And there funds were raised to help purchase the freedom of their children. And funds continue to be raised over the next several years. So that's Center Church's involvement. But Center Church is not alone in that. There was a statewide committee for the Colonization Society that included a number of people. And if we look at the pictures on the screen here, we'll go to my right. We'll look at the person in the black and white lithograph. That's the Reverend Joel Hawes, who was the pastor of Center Church at the time and who was also the director of the Hartford Auxiliary of the Connecticut Colonization Society. And then to my left, the person wearing the Episcopal clerical garb is the Reverend Thomas Church Brownell, who was the founder of Washington College, which is now known as Trinity College. And all these 3 men, along with some others, were all responsible for Abdulrahman's visit to Connecticut, which centered on Center Church. He also visited the African Mission School, at Washington College, Trinity College now, and some other places, the American School for the Deaf, as part of a larger tour of New England, trying to raise money to purchase the freedom of their children so that they could all go to Liberia together. Ultimately, enough funds were raised to purchase the freedom of 2 sons and the family of one of the sons, and they did relocate to Liberia. Funds were not raised to purchase the remaining 7 children who remained in Mississippi and Louisiana, as Sheika Karen had said. So that's a snapshot of Senator Church's involvement. I'm sure as the conversation goes along, we can talk some more about that. Back to you, Andre.
Dr. Hearst, thank you so much for, putting a cap on the end of that, not the end of the story, but towards the end of that story with Senator Church's great involvement in this sojourn, this journey of a great man. What I got from the conversation and what I'm hoping that our listening and viewing audience is getting is that Senator Church had a lot to do with movements that ended up having national implications and an impact. The ACS, became great and far-reaching, and the ASL became one of the greatest approaches to language in America. All started right here in Connecticut. But another descendant that's here for us to talk to today is Dr. Artemus W. Gaye. He's only going to be able to stream with us through audio, but he is here to talk to us today because he is from the official Royal House of Sori. And I wanted to make sure that he had a chance to talk to us today about his perspective on the impact of his descendants' story here in the United States of America. How did it feel with his people back in Africa, and also what does he feel the impact in the legacy is today? Dr. Gaye, welcome. Okay, Dr. Gaye, are you there? Okay. I'm not hearing him. I don't know if anybody else is. But Dr. Gaye, if at any time you're able to join us, just, jump in and get in when you fit in, and we'll always make a space for you. But until that time, we're going to go ahead and move on and go back to Sheika Karen, because she brought with her today a host of really wonderful pictures of the times that she's had in this long journey. And Sheika Karen, I just wanted you to go ahead and narrate these pictures and talk to us about those experiences.
Sure. So this picture was taken in this year, May of 2024. Here you actually see Dr. Gaye in the front, standing next to a gentleman in front, which is actually John Quincy Adams' great-great-grandson, and he's named John Quincy Adams. And so this was a remarkable experience, because we had the delegation from the elders of Timbo, who are actually they have an organization there called the Prince, and it's ran by the wise men of Timbo, which is my ancestral uncle, Elijah Moody Berry, who is the gentleman in the back. But what's so important about this particular picture is that it also has Jeff Braven in there, along with Dr. Hearst and the mayor of Connecticut. But as you mentioned before, Dr. Hearst had mentioned that American School of the Deaf played an important role as well in this whole journey of ours, right? You also have the mayor of Natchez, Mr. Dan Gibson, who is standing next to the gentleman standing next to the mayor. So if you go to the right, to my right, I don't know if it's your left or my right, he's the man who's standing right behind Dr. Gaye. And he also been so supportive on the journey of securing Prince Sori's legacy. All of these parties came together: Senator Church, the American School of the Deaf, the mayor of Connecticut, John Quincy Adams. So all the key players that played significant roles in Prince Sori and his wife Isabella's freedom were in that room.
I'm sure the ancestors are looking down and smiling at how things came full circle.
Absolutely. I think it's the only time in history that such a union of the people that were part of that journey came together. It's quite remarkable.
May 2024, Center Church.
Yes, Center Church. Yes. To actually walk through those doors, the same doors that my grandparents came through for their freedom, was overwhelming and remarkable. Yes, next slide. This is another part of this journey is Trinity College. Trinity College, because we have to put ourselves in the mind frame that these were two African Americans that were slaves. They were still just getting to their freedom. They didn't have the liberties as the free blacks or the whites at that time. Trinity College played a significant role as well in housing and where would they go. Once they came to Connecticut to speak in Center Church, which was a all white, a predominantly white congregation, even though I've been told there were some, and Dr. Hearst can speak more on this, but I know that there was a separation in the church. So it was ran by the whites at that time. So they had to stay somewhere. And so Trinity College played a significant role there. So we visit Trinity College as well, with Dr. John Selders being our host. Next slide. The symposium here, that means symposium, and that's in French. My French is really bad these days. But in 2022, in December, I went for the first time. I was the first American to go over with a young lady by the name of Beverly Adams, who's also a descendant. Her and I embarked on to meet the elders, the relatives from Timbo, Prince Sori's actual family, which was found by Dr. Artemus Gaye. He was the one that found the family through his research in his book, A Tossed American Pie. So we actually went there and we met them. They held a symposium and had us speak on who we are, how we became descendants, and the whole story that has been outlined in Terry Alfred's book, Prince Among Slaves. So this was my first time meeting the family and the welcome that they gave me. Next slide. And this again, we come back to May 2024 when the delegation was here. American School of the Deaf, who, as we have recalled, was significant in Prince Sori's pursuit of freedom for him and his family by Thomas Gallaudet. So we were welcomed as an official delegate from the official Royal House of Sori and the Wise Men of Timbo. So this was the banner that they had for us at the school. The whole school turned out, the students, everything. We had a grand luncheon, and the other mayor, which her name escapes me, but I'm sure that you probably know it. And if you can share that with the audience, because she was very welcoming to the delegation.
Which town was that? Do you remember? Near West Hartford. Okay.
It was West Hartford. Yes, it was in West Hartford. So next slide. This is my husband, who took on a royal title when he married me by the official Royal House of Sori, which is Duke Rayshawn Chatman and Dr. John Selders, who was our host, who along with Dr. Eric Hearst, that took us to American School of the Deaf, as well as to Trinity College, and has been just a great ally in the preservation of Prince Sori's legacy, along with Dr. Hearst, and of course, Andre as well, and Tammy. So this picture was us just standing there being greeted by the American School of the Deaf. Next slide. This is a traditional Fula home, and this is one of the homes that Prince Sori's servants and some of his team or staff, what we would call now, instead of servants, but the people that served the royal family would live in. This is a traditional home, and I was able to visit that when I was in Timbo. So that was very exciting for me to actually be able to see it and how it's designed. And it looks really small from the outside, but it is really big. You know, in California times, that's almost a palace. So next slide. This is the mosque that was built by Prince Sori's uncle, the Al-Fayai. There were two ruling families in Timbo. One were the Soris, who now also calls themselves Barry, B-A-R-R-Y. The Al-Fayai. Also, they would trade every couple years who would be the ruling member, either the brother, you know, so it was two brothers. And this brother, which is Al-Fayai, built this mosque in 1700s, and it still stands today. It's been updated, and I got a chance to go in there and actually pray. So that was really remarkable for me. Next slide. This is Dr. Gaye and the head of the Elders of Timbo, Elijah Amudi Berry. He is the one who leads the delegation from Timbo when he comes to America to meet as many descendants as possible. In his own words, he said that they had lost a son, and when Dr. Gaye and myself ventured to Timbo, he felt that we had brought Prince Sori home through our DNA. Next slide. This is the wise men of Timbo, and the entire village, I believe, came out to meet us. There was hundreds of people, reporters, the U.S. Embassy, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for Guinea were there when I came out, and this was some of the delegation that were there. They wanted to tell us their story, and they wanted to hear our story. Next slide. This is also still some of the remnants of the people that were there and the reporters that wanted to hear the story of Prince Sori and his life in Natchez, Mississippi. Next slide. This is me in Center Church. This was in May. I think this was in May of 2022, maybe. Dr. Hearst might be able to tell me. I've been to Center Church. It's like home away from home. So I'm getting lost in my time. This could have been even in 2023. I think this might have been in 2023. I was there. It was 2023, right? I was there with Andre and Dr. Hearst, as well as the delegation. So, next slide. And this is us at the State Department. If you look over to the left, there's a Caucasian gentleman. That is Terry Alfred, the author of The Prince Among Slaves. Next to him is Dr. Artemus Gaye. On the far right is myself, and in the middle, the lady with the beautiful African attire that's in turquoise. That is the ambassador for Guinea in the United States in Washington, D.C. And then straight ahead is the the Secretary of State for the Western African Association. So there are different secretaries of state. I did not know that, but there's a Secretary of State for various regions, and he's for West Africa. And then right behind the gentleman in white is Ambassador Fitrail, who is the ambassador to Guinea, in Guinea now in Conakry. So we were invited by the U.S. State Department to come and tell our story because Prince Sori actually went to the White House. He was one of the few Blacks that ever went to the White House during slavery, and he was welcomed and was actually freed through the act. There was a what is it, Dr. Gaye? He joined us, but there was a and it just escapes me. There was a God, I can't think of it, and I'm just, my mind has faltered here. Dr. Hearst, can you help me out? There was a treaty. Thank you. There was a treaty where you could not actually take a Moor, anyone from North Africa that was under the Moor Treaty as a slave. And when the letter was given to was written by Andrew Mulchek, which was a newspaperman in Natchez, Mississippi, and say, we have a prince here that is claiming to be Moor. And they sent that to the Sultan in Morocco. And he said he needs to be freed under the treaty. And the President, John Quincy Adams, signed that declaration to free him, that proclamation. And it was endorsed by the the Secretary of State, the U.S. Secretary of State. And that's where they came into play, and they wanted to kind of beg our pardon and say, we're sorry, we apologize for what your family has gone through, how those descendants were never reunited with their with the parent and the grandmother and the grandfather. And so they have invited us back twice, and we have a very cohesive relationship with them now. So next slide. This is the actual picture that most people see in the news. It's in the Library of Congress. I went there myself. I wanted to feel it, touch it, make it tangible, make it real to me. And so I was there. I had been crying too. I don't know why I was crying, but it was quite emotional for me since I've been doing this for 30 years, trying to preserve the legacy. And we have come full circle now. And I think it was the last journey for me. I had went to all the places he had been, and finally I was holding the picture that he set for. And so I think that that meant a lot to me. So next slide. And this is actually Artemus' father. He's no longer with us, but he was part of my family from Liberia. He was the ancestor, the elder before Artemus. And the lady to the right of me with the burgundy purse is Elder Barry's wife, and that's her sister. And they were in my hometown of Natchez, Mississippi, walking in the same footsteps as Prince Sori and meeting all of my family members. So that was very overwhelming. And it was such a joy because not only had I been to their home, they have now come to mine. So it was full circle. Next slide. This is us again at our favorite place in the world, Center Church, with Dr. Eric Hearst. And we will continue to be part. I think we are adopted now, because even my uncle, he says, even though this is a church, I feel like I'm home. So I think that we always are coming, because he's Muslim, but he said this is one place, one church that he's been to, that he feels like he's home and he's fitting right in. So this was us, and that's one of the historians that he brought with him. Next slide. And that is my official symbol. You will see it throughout my social media, on my letters, whatever is official letter that I sent out from the official Royal House of Sori, it will carry my seal. So that's it, I think. I think that's all the pictures that I have.
Well, I'm going to make sure I jump in. First of all, thank you, Sheika Karen. Thank you so much for that narration. And you gave us even more perspective of the story. But before Dr. Artemus Gaye fades out, I want to make sure he's here. I want to make sure I talk to him. Welcome, Dr. Artemus Gaye. Welcome.
Thank you. And yes, sorry for the inconvenience. It's one of those days, but things are moving on.
That's okay. I'm glad you're here. Better late than never, right?
Yes.
I just wanted to ask you really quick. Sheika Karen has done a really good job of filling us in with the story, but it was important for us to make sure that we spoke to the descendants today. And so I want to ask you really quick, how did you find out you were a descendant? How do you become you don't just become one. So can you talk to me about that part of the journey?
Thank you so much. It's Liberia Civil War time. We are trying to find ourselves safety, modern war, and we've already known about the history of Liberia. A lot of people have their ancestry traced to a lot of families in the USA. So, and here we are in this ancestral land in Grand Cape Mount County, Rabosport, interesting name after a big slave owner. And we are there, and great-grandmother is telling us family story. And she's reflecting on her great-grandfather, Simon, and his connection to the U.S. And how she prayed that we get to know these stories. And this is time when nobody even knew whose Abdulrahman is. It was all about Simon Rahman and his family that came to Liberia. So fast forward, Civil War continued. We survived. We escaped the tragedy of the war, and I come to the U.S. and I'm trying to find out who is Simon Rahman, who were his family, why is it that he has his association with Mississippi. We are from New Georgia, Liberia, a community that was built in the 1830s. So upon doing research, I was in Detroit, and I started to dig deeper. And then as things were happening, we found out that Simon Rahman, we knew when he went to Liberia, we knew his family tree, we knew all of that, but there was not a single connection to Mississippi, to who Abdul Rahman or Isabella were until, until 1999, when I stumbled across a lady at the Africana Library in Northwestern University, and she gave us a book on the animation of African. And she said, since in fact in Detroit we're told it was impossible for me to ever trace Osama Rahman lineage because he was a slave. He was literally named. So this lady at the Africana Library, now so rest in peace, Dr. Patricia Indongwe, a Nigerian American, she was able to find that paper done by the American Colonization Society on the mining mission. And then we stumbled across the name of of Rahman and Isabella, but they were traced to Tennessee. I said, but if these people are from Mississippi, how can there be Tennessee connection? And it was through that process we had a connection, and we made a long journey to the town where we now knew that Simon was born, in Natchez. It was there that we started to meet some wonderful people, David Dreyer or Sir Baxley, and they were able to say, look, we don't know Simon, but we know Abdulrahman. And we did the both checking of the documentation, and there was
Just a little bit loud, just a little bit louder, sir.
all right. So it was in Natchez that people started to share documents with us. And then we met a lady who had a wonderful Bible that had names of family members all listed. And when we started to do the tracing of these things, this was just, the puzzle was just coming into play. And then we found out that, yes, if this Abdul Rahman and Isabella, who left from Tennessee, who are listed from Tennessee, interestingly, that they might have come from Mississippi. And when we did the tree, we found out definitely that Simon was from Natchez, and he also in the story checked out that he went to Liberia, and we were able to connect that connection that Abdul Rahman did have a son called Simon Rahman, and that became the long process of us finding the other descendants that were all stuck in Mississippi. So grandmother died, great grandmother died in Liberia. I never saw her again when I skipped, but it was just the fulfilling part of our legacy to know that those who went to Liberia also had connection to Simon Rahman in 1830. So that was the way we began the process of knowing our roots from Mississippi and also New Georgia and Liberia, where Simon, his brother Levi, all lived and died.
Dr. Gay, how did you get in contact with, would she be your cousin, Karen?
Well, when I went to Mississippi, it became a news. Everybody heard about it. So a lot of folks started to come in touch with us, sharing their documentation. And it would interest you to note that those documents checked out. The inventory reports were very clear. I learned a lot. I found out news stories. I also got to know about others who left. So Princess Karen contacted me, and there began a long journey of relationship that have grown over the last 15 years. And through that process, we were able to find other descendants in the Mississippi, Louisiana community, and that has expanded. There are others who have come through too, saying that they are related. But as far as I'm concerned, we've been very open to know who they are and who we all are, because the issue of a connection is what build relationship and what build community. So that's how Princess Karen have been the one pushing. When I was weak, when I had no more strength, she said, ultimately, we got to find and work together. So this is the story of our legacy.
I'm glad that you're able to answer some of these questions. I want to ask you another question. How important? Well, first of all, you are a prolific writer, and I'd like you, if you will, to tell us the titles of some of your books that have helped you bridge the gap in communication and letting the world know about your ancestors.
Thank you. I wrote a book called Rooted Beyond Boundaries, my first book. That was after my dissertation, which
What was that title again?
Rooted Beyond Boundaries.
Rooted Beyond Boundaries. Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's a refugee story, but it's also a story of resilience of people of color who've struggled all through the issue of being moved from place to place. And the essence and the theme of that story was to say that we as Black folks have been rooted beyond our boundaries, but we've never given up. And that book tells the story of the formation of Liberia and the slave trade, both sides of the Atlantic. So that was the first book. And it came in
Rooted
celebration.
Beyond Boundaries.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then in the second book, it taught American Pie, which tells the story of the formation of Liberia, the work of Abdulrahman's family, Simon Rahman, Levi Rahman, John, a lot of people who were involved with the formation of Liberia. That's the second book. And then
What's that title again, please?
It touched American Pie.
It touched American Pie.
It touched American Pie. You know, pie is, you know how pie can be messy. So, but it can also be delicious. So that's why
A tossed
American pie.
Pie. Thank you. I just want to make sure everybody can go find that.
Gotcha. And the last one now is Dr. Isabella Rahman and the African Prince of Futa Jallo. And that for me is my autobiography is the biography of Abdulrahman from my perspective, from my POV. So, and that tells the story of Abdulrahman and Isabella, but I spent a lot of time digging up Isabella's history because sometimes she gets overlooked in a lot of the narrative. But I found out that she may have not gone to school, but indeed she was a gynecologist, an OBGYN. And this book is to celebrate her because she was Liberia's oldest citizen on its Independence Day in 1847 and is listed as a nurse in the Liberian history. So I thought to celebrate her because sometimes we get caught up telling Abdulrahman's story and we don't tell Isabella's story. So that's
I want to make sure that everybody could hear the titles. The last title, An African Prince of Futa Jallo.
Yes, Dr. Isabella Rahman and the African
right.
Prince. Yes.
And this is a celebration of Isabella Rahman's wife. And as you said, many times she's forgotten or left out. We want to make sure that we keep the ladies involved. So we got our three titles: An African Prince of Futa Jallo, we have Rooted Beyond Boundaries, and we have A Tossed American Pie. Dr. Gaye, thank you for talking to us for a few minutes. Don't go anywhere. I just want to share the wealth a little bit here and go back to talk to Sheika Karen real quick.
Okay.
We're going to bounce back and forth as much as we can now that we have Dr. Gaye here. Sheika Karen, Dr. Gaye talked about meeting you and realizing that you guys are cousins and that you felt like it was a real thing. And I mentioned the word real because from my previous conversations with you, you talked about Descendants coming out of the woodwork.
Yes.
Talk to me about that.
So I used to get every time I do any type of public appearance, I start getting maybe hundreds of calls or because I used to make myself so accessible. I have my phone number out there in the public domain. And I would get people that said, I'm related to you. I did the DNA, but you don't match me. Or but I know that I'm related because for whatever reason. And at first, I never had to do this because it was always about not so much finding descendants for me as it was preserving Prince Sori's legacy in the public domain in history. So to make sure that the United States was recognizing it, that the academic community acknowledged him, the religious community, because even though he practiced as a Christian, he still was a practicing secret Muslim, and to make that connection, and also to bring that root back to Natchez from where I was born, right? Because it gives you a lot of strength. And what people don't realize is that for Natchez, a slave town and very oppressed town during the civil rights movement, many Black boys and girls, like for me, we didn't have a lot to look up to, but knowing that I was a princess always was the catalyst for me feeling like I was special and I could do anything. I could go to college. I could be these great things that I dreamed about, you know, that I could have a big house or whatever that might be. So to me, it was very important to share that story and to find the descendants in Natchez, because since Natchez is not a transient city, it's easy to connect the dots. We know who so-and-so is. So, well, who's that cousin? Who's your mama? Who's your auntie, like this? So when I get other people outside of that sphere of that circle of Natchez, I can't really validate them. You know, even if they say I took a DNA and I'm related to someone, that still doesn't mean a lot to us, because, you know, people have different parents, right? So as Artemus said, we kind of just opened it up originally to say, okay, anyone could come. But then it was like, well, how are you a princess? Why do you get to wear the title? I want to wear the title and things like that. I inherited the title a couple ways. First, I inherited from birth, from just being, from that legacy itself and knowing it. Then I also was in the Middle East for 16 years, and I married a royal family member. So I had a princess title there. And then my mother took me to, in 1973, I think that's when the King of Morocco came. I think it was the fifth, Mohammed V, and she took me to DC. He knew the story. She was explaining. She was excited. She was working for government herself during that time. And they gave me a document and say, from now on, your Her Royal Highness, Sheika Karen. And, you know, and so I've always had that title. So I never had to defend it. And so when other people with the DNA started to come about, people were saying, well, I met someone in Natchez and you know, and so we just kind of, now the official Royal House of Sori, because there's even other Royal Houses of Sori out there, but the official Royal House of Sori is in Natchez, Mississippi. And what we do for Descendants now, we're only going as far out as the 6th generation, and you have to have a direct relative from Natchez, Mississippi. Because remember, we can kind of understand who the families are from Natchez and even into Louisiana. But after that, there are thousands upon thousands of descendants that we could never find. And so I look at it as though we're all united. We're all one family as Black Americans. We all came over. The majority of African Americans came to America enslaved. So for me, it's bigger to understand that legacy and the power that the legacy have, rather than finding the descendants themselves. I'm never going to really turn away someone who feels that they're a descendant. However, to be officially recognized for us, there is a criteria that we have to adhere to. But pretty much with Dr. Gaye, it was so interesting because my mother called me and she said, there is this guy from Liberia who says he's related, you know, and I was like, from Liberia? What has Liberia got to do with us? And she says, no, she says, so my mother, you know, they keep everything in the Bible. And she says, no, I talked to your grandmother who was Annabelle Westco. She said, your grandmother, because she was still alive, said that there was a Simon Rockman and that he went to Liberia because they knew that he had went. They were sending messages back. And so the kids were kept abreast of what was going on. It's not like there was no communication. They used to send letters back. And so because they were still trying to free the children, right? When Thomas Foster himself died, his brother took some of the slaves, and so did some of his other relatives. So they were keeping abreast of where those children were. And my mother was so excited. And so I was living in the Middle East at the time. And so I called back and I was asking about, and then Terry Alfred had reached out to me as well, and he got really excited about it. So we were able to trace Artemus without any discrepancy. We knew about Simon Rockman, right?
I want to talk to you more about some of those documents.
Yes.
So about Terry Alford in a minute, but I want to bring in Dr. Hearst.
Yes.
He is steeped in these documents. And let him talk to us about that, and then I'll let you and Dr. Gaye have some final words as descendants. Go ahead, Reverend Hearst.
Yes, if Mariana is able to pull them up for us, there are 2 archival documents that were made aware to us this past May that were pretty much languishing in the Connecticut Historical Society for 200 years. And the first, what you see is the account book of Seth Terry. Seth Terry was an accountant and a business person in the city. His family were all members of Center Church. He was an accountant and a lawyer for the American School for the Deaf. And as we go along with the history, he was a very close friend of James Pennington, who was an abolitionist and the pastor of the Talcott Colored Congregational Church. If we could go back up for a second, Mariana, let's go back up to the first slide very quickly. These are all people who had contributed to the cause of Abdulrahman and his children. And as you see on this page towards, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth from the bottom, we can't confirm it just yet, but you see the name Pennington.
Mm-hmm.
And he and James Pennington were closely connected. Chris Webber talks about that in his biography of James Pennington. If we can go down, here you see the ledger from 1830. Abdulrahman died in 1829, but efforts to continue raising funds to purchase his family's freedom continued to at least 1833. And in 1830, in this portion here, you see that the sum of $2,300 was raised to purchase the freedom of 2 of the sons. I think Simon and Levi are mentioned in this. I can't really.
Yes, they are. They were
mentioned in this to free them and their families to go to Liberia. There's the proof.
Yes.
There's the proof.
And I would like to interject. When I first saw these documents, because no one had saw these documents before, and I started crying because the elders of Timbo were with me and they didn't understand the tears. And I was explaining that could have been a different life for myself and my family that were enslaved in Natchez. It was a very difficult time. You know, I remember even seeing a person hanging from a tree when I was 10.
Wow.
And so because of that, when I saw that they were still, you know, the Isabella, the woman, was still in pursuit of getting her family back that they had left over in Natchez. I'm from the root. So, and then to see Simon's name, because it, you know, there's always scrutiny among the human being. You know, even they were like, well, he didn't have a son named Simon. Yes, he did. My grandmother told me. I knew it when I saw Dr. Gaye, and he said Simon Rockman, because this was not a name that we talked a lot about, but my grandmother knew it. And so it was validation for the fact that we existed. It was tangible evidence of Dr. Gaye. It was tangible evidence of what my grandmother has told me all those years. She died at 103. And so for me, it's these documents, they're not, so this is not a story of make-believe. This is an actual person that walked in actual Center Church that was actually in Connecticut, that they have records. They have records. And so these are not just documents. These are people's lives. This is what could have been. And I don't think that most people, you know, we try to push slavery to the back, but it's systematically embedded in our DNA. And so this shows us that there could have been freedom. And so I was like, where's the money? My uncle thought I was like, where's the money? I need the money. I said, no. I wanted to know what happened to the funds that could have freed us. What became of it, right? So it was a journey. And Dr. Hearst, Dr. Selders, you know, he came over to me and, you know, and held my hand and he said, I understand, you know, I understand. So Dr. Harris, thank you so much for sharing this.
We only have a few minutes left. I want to make sure I get to Dr. Hearst. Thanks for the documents. I want to make sure that I make a correction about the title of Dr. Gaye's book. It looks like we've lost him again. But Isabella Rockman and the African Prince of Futa Jala is the name of the book. Thank you, Dr. Hearst. I want to make sure that I had that title out there correct. But if you look for the books of Dr. Artemus Gaye, you will find that out. But before we get out of here, I want to make sure I devoted that time to not just the only queen we have here today. Oh, there's Dr. Gaye again. I want to make sure that I ask the descendants an important question. I think it's an important question. When you saw read the book or saw the documentary Prince Among Slaves, Terry Alford's rendition of your story, had come to you guys and talked to you guys, the descendants?
I can answer that more so maybe than Dr. Gaye, because it was my cousin that was in Terry's class that told the story of our great-great-grandfather. At first, he was shocked and it was a little bit of disbelief, but then Terry started doing research. There was a gentleman by the name of James Register that had actually wrote a book called The Prince of Jalan. So Terry did some investigation and met with some of the descendants. It's in the matter of fact, Artemus is also in the documentary of Prince Among Slaves.
So he did. So
Yeah.
Karen, so he did talk to you all.
Yes, he did.
As we get ready to get out of here, Dr. Gaye, how important is it, do you think, for these researchers and others folks who are telling this story, how important is it to talk to the descendants?
It is so important because thank for Princess Karen for laying up that historical aspect of how the film was done. Yes, it happened that visit to Natchez, Mississippi, in the summer of 2004, as I was doing more research with my cousin, led others to be interested in this film, into doing a documentary. As you all know, it's so difficult for us Black folks to get our story told, sadly, unless the white folk get involved, then it becomes known out there. So the fact that we were able to create this great effort for this story, it made us feel good that the story should be told, and the best way to tell it when we tell it ourselves. So today, most of the people who are now involved or coming on board, I'm glad that little research work of my cousin, when we took a very old vehicle, if you watch the film, I talk about that vehicle broke down us from every aspect of our way. A vehicle that I bought for $250. Drove it from Chicago to Natchez.
Dr. Gaye, I want to thank you for joining us today. I know it was great difficulty. You had a hard time, but I'm so happy you were able to spend a few minutes with us today on Conversations at Noon. Reverend Dr. Eric Hearst, thank you so much for helping us get this whole ball rolling here in the United States and at Center Church. And finally, and definitely last but not least, Your Royal Highness Sheika Karen Chatman, thank you for joining us today on Conversations at Noon. And everybody who's out there listening to us, thanks for joining us. Make sure to do the survey and look out for us to come and see you again real soon. Sheika, it's time to go.
I just want to say one thing. I have a book as well as a children's book. It's called The Adventures of the Lost Prince.
Say again?
The Adventures of the Lost Prince.
Okay. All right. Is that a pictures book, children's picture book?
It is. It's on the bestsellers list right now. You can get it on Amazon as well.
Dr. Gaye. Dr. Gaye, she's gaining on you. Everybody else, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.